I found my notes and I closed my notes up here.
Oh, for yours?
If you're wondering, this is going to be different in 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, you get the whole thing in. We're good. So, this will be different from what I shared the other day. I think I shared the other day, nothing that I have is really new. Stuff, a lot of stuff that I have, I was asked to share things that help me, as we were growing. And so this is one of the, if there was one thing that's helped me, not only in going past 200, but everything I've ever done is this idea of vision. And so I think it says go to page 19 from room 2, but the title is Vision, Key to the Future. And so if you're looking for that. Just a little quote to get started with. It says that the size of the leader is determined by the depths of his convictions, the height of his ambitions, and the wisdom, and the width of his wisdom, and the reach of his love. The hard part about vision is I think we have a lot of people that decide that vision needs to come from our people. I was in a situation where I was an associate pastor in South Texas, and I had a pastor. He was a great guy. He was a wonderful person. And when he and I would talk at staff meeting, he would just talk about what his dreams were for the church, and he would talk about attendance dreams that he had. But he also would come back after he said all that and said, "But I'm just kind of that pastor that lets everybody lead me to that place." And I'm thinking to myself, even as he's talking about this, and we had so much stuff going on, I'm thinking to myself, hey, we're never going to get to where you want to be if you're not willing to take the reins. And I can remember going to board meetings and sitting in board meetings and looking at, we had fantastic leaders in that particular church. And we had a lot of good things that we were doing, but every single one of those leaders were looking at him for vision. And I can remember, I've been there about a year, and I don't know what was going on in his head, but in that board meeting, he looked out over the board and said, guys, he said, I'm not a visionary leader. And as he said that, I looked around the boardroom, and I just saw everyone deflate. And then one of the key influencers on the board was a doctor, and he was thinking for a minute, and then he said, "That's fine." He says, "You're not Moses." And he says, "Even Moses had an Aaron." And he says, "We have an Aaron." And then he pointed at me. I gave my resignation to the pastor that night. And the reason I did that wasn't because I didn't believe in the pastor. It was because I didn't want to undercut his authority. Because what that key member was saying, we have a guy right there who's willing to share vision. And we have a guy right there that's willing to be outspoken. And you know me at all, I'm a little bit outspoken at different times. And so when he did that, I just went up to him and I said, I love you. He says, but you just need to know that as soon as I can find a place to go, because God had already been working on me as well, I'm going to go. And he said, thank you. He understood what I was saying. Not because we're doing a bad job. I mean, we used to have a youth group of 150 people in Texas meeting on Friday night. That's a big deal to compete with high school football in Texas. And so he understood what I was saying was I'm not going to take your vision away or communicate that vision. But I say all that to say this is that vision is important. In a pastor, the vision comes from you. Hopefully, it comes from God to you. But the vision comes to you. Those who most powerfully and permanently influence their generations have been those who see more and farther than other people. I don't know if you know who William Carey is. William Carey has been called the father of modern missionary from the Baptist groups. They were talking about how they could reach more people, and everybody was focused on their parishes. And instead of being focused on the parishes, he was seeing the whole world. He looked at a map of the world and said, here's our parish. This is our entire world. And at that particular time, nobody was really thinking about that. They were just thinking about their own little areas. And so he saw past his own little area. David Livingstone said, I will go anywhere provided it's forward. The frontiers of the kingdom of God were never advanced by men and women of caution. This is one of those areas, and I've always struggled with this because I love people and I really want to offend people, but by the same token, I realize that time is short. It was drawn home to me about 5 years ago, so most of you know this. 5 years ago, at 39 years old, I had a heart attack. And I can remember, as I'm going up to Olathe to go to the hospital, and it's a small town, and so the people that are taking care of you, and we're going up, and then you hear the radio in the background, and I can remember, even though I was having chest pains and different things, we had a guy who was 96 years old, and I knew his address, and as we were going up, it came over the radio that he was having trouble, and they dispatched somebody to go to be with him. And even though I was hurting, I'm thinking to myself, man, I hope Harry does okay. And then when I get up to Olathe, my wife meets me there. She comes, and before she says anything else, I said, honey, just make sure somebody goes to see Harry. He's in the hospital. And my wife is 5'9". And when people look at her, they just think, oh, she's so meek and kind. And that's an act. Because in that moment, she just looked at me and she said, really? He says, you don't think that somebody else can take care of this? I don't think this is part of the reason that you're sitting here. And not to make myself, in that moment, it hit me that I had this giant vision, but I wasn't letting anybody else in on it. Because I had this idea of what it was going to be, and so because I had an idea of the way it was supposed to be, then I was the only one that could go out and do anything. And so it wasn't that the vision thing was bad. And some of us have a vision, some of us don't have vision, but if we don't share that vision, we're going to get into that here in a little bit. And we don't give people opportunity to be a part of that vision, you're never going to break any of the barriers that you're looking to break, whether it's a 100-person barrier, or a 200 barrier, or a 300 barrier, whatever it is. Pastor, you're there to lead your people. You're not there to do all the work for them. You're there to love your people, but you're not there to keep from offending them. As we were challenged even with our theology from different times. There are times when you have a vision God's given you, if you believe that God's given you that vision, you're going to have to stick up for that vision. You're going to have to sometimes do it as gently and lovingly as you can, or sometimes you're going to have to be as stern as you can. And the Lord will lead you whichever direction you need to go on that. But regardless of that, when you get to that place where you understand vision, then your church can begin to grow. A growing church has a few things. A growing church is growing when it has an inspiring vision. Is your vision inspiring? I mean, is it big? Is it as our DS likes to say, a hairy, audacious goal that only God can help you do? Or is it, if you're running 15, is your goal, hey, we're just going to have 20 for Easter? People don't get behind those things. People don't get excited about the little things. They get excited about the big things. And if you have an inspiring vision, one that goes beyond attendance goals, one that goes beyond, we're going to have better music, one that goes beyond, we're going to have better children's. If your goal is we're going to reach lost people, we're going to reach and transform our community. When we were sharing vision, one of the things that I talk a lot about is transforming a community. When you're in a small community like Fort Scott, you can make a big influence. And we do, as a reminder, believe in a transformative gospel. And the gospel can transform us as individuals. Do we not think that God can transform an entire community? And so these are the ways I put out visions. And we're not looking to become a bigger church or a better church. We're looking to be a tool for God, a redemptive tool for God in our community. We don't want to be the church that people go to. I mean, obviously, I want everybody to come, and I don't want to be the cool place where people come. But I want to be those places people come and can be transformed. That they can have their addictions can be broken. Their marriage can be put back together. They can be healed physically, emotionally, financially, and all those kinds of things. And I want to be that place. And so that's how we put that out there as vision. And so that goes along with the whole idea. I'm not going to read all of them because I won't have time to get through. But that goes along with having goals and strategies. Being a pastor, getting leads, and not one that waits until everybody's ready. If you wait for everybody in your congregation to be ready to take the next step, you're never going to get there. And that's what I did last time.
Push the right.
Which one?
The right button. Yeah.
There we go. Sorry.
Which one's the right one?
So, anyway. So you need to push the right lead.
Notice that, Dustin. Which one is the right one?
That's the wrong one.
The right button.
Anyway, let's keep going even though I'm ready. All right? And so a church, it has to have a growing church has a pastor that leads. A growing church has a congregation of ministers. If you were in my first presentation, I talked about the importance of getting your layman to minister and take over ministry within your congregation. When that stuff happens, great things happen. And then a church that is growing is a church that has a plan that will work. And so, can I just tell you, any plan that you have from God that you put together will work. If you'll stick with the plan. What we tend to do, again, when it comes to visions, we have this great big vision, we have this plan to get there, but once we run into one obstacle, we just kind of throw it out the door. Because, I don't want to fail. Because let's face it, pastors, we have egos. And so instead of moving forward and doing what needs to be done, sometimes we'll just throw it out. What you really need to do is stick with a plan. When we first started making the transition musically in our church, I had a particular individual. When we were talking about being able to grow and to reach young couples and young families, and we talked about the idea of moving our music a little bit to a more contemporary vein. And this particular person really struggled with it. They led music for us for a long time. Very talented musician, really understood music. Beautiful, beautiful man as far as his heart goes. But the whole music thing really he struggled with. And so he finally submitted to that. And then, I kid you not, we started making the shift. In 2 weeks after we started making the shifts, he came up to me. He said, "We're all young people." They said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, you said if we change music, we're going to start growing. Young people were going to be coming." He says, "It's been 2 weeks." He says, "We're all young people at?" And I just looked at him and said, "Jesse, really? Are you really telling me that you're expecting, that people that have never been in our congregation to hear that we have a praise and worship team, a contemporary music deal, and they're just going to come flocking in?" He's like, "Well, that's what you said." And I said, "Well, who have you brought to church?"
Good question.
And I said, "Instead of sitting there with your arms crossed while we're singing," and I said, "maybe you need to go out to the young people that you work with and start talking to them about Jesus and saying, you know what, you don't get our church to try." Now, some people look at that and say, "Well, Pastor, you didn't really say that to somebody, you could have left." Well, sometimes people got to leave. This particular guy left. He left. He took his wife with him. And then when he was at the place where he was at, ran into the same kind of Pharisaical teachings that he wanted us to have. And he's back and supporting the ministry, doing all kinds of things. And there's a lot more to that story if you want to tell me. I can talk to you about that some other time. But you know what? It was okay that he left. Horace did. He was a tither. And he's a great man of God. And I still believe that to this day. Just because he doesn't like the music doesn't mean he's not a wonderful man of God. But what he was doing was he was getting in the way of the vision. And what you have to do as a leader, as a pastor sometimes, is stand up to the vision that God's given to your church. Even if that means you got to let him go. And so, if you're going to do that, then you need to make sure that you have a sharply focused vision. And so, a sharply focused vision. A growing church has a detailed description of its preferred future condition. I'm just going to go through the first three things. I'm going to back up. So, the benefits of that sharply focused vision statement are: it'll give us unity, It'll keep our priorities in order, and it will build responsibility and accountability. When I first got to Fort Scott, our second board meeting, I asked them to write an email. I said, you can either write an email or act like you're writing a letter to somebody. 5 years down the road, 5 years down the road, I want you to describe what you want this church to look like. I want you to describe it from everything from is the grass cut, to the way you were greeted, to the type of music that we were playing, to Sunday school, to your small group, to the preaching, to all those things. And I want you just to write this letter saying this is the best place that you've ever been, as if you're trying to convince somebody to come to church here. And so they did that, and I gave about 10 minutes to write that email, and then in the board meeting I took all of the stuff in, and I just started reading them out loud. And the reason I did that was because even though there was a little bit of variation, every single one of them expressed the same desired direction. And so what you have to do is you have to convince your leadership that they all want to go to the same place. Now, how you get there is a whole different deal. That's where the hard work comes in. And so what I had to do to begin with was get them to see that everybody was wanting to go in the same direction. Everybody wanted to grow as a church. Everybody wanted to see people saved. Everybody wanted to see people sanctified. Everybody wanted to see good fellowship. Everybody wanted to see quality programs. Everybody wanted to have good preaching. Everybody wanted to have all those things. And so once I got to understand all those things that everybody wanted, then the hard work could take place of detailing out a really good plan to get us there. And so that's the importance of a good vision. So when we talk about that, that brings unity to the direction. You know, all of a sudden you don't have everybody thinking that their program is more important than everybody else's program, because we have this plan or this mission statement. And so we're all going to buy into this. I gave them a rough mission statement. And depending on who you read, they'll tell you to do it differently. Sometimes they tell you to have them come up with it. What I found is if I ask them to come up with a mission statement, we'll never get there. And so after prayer and fasting and direction from God, I give this mission statement out and say, here's what I've come up with. What do you think? It didn't end up being the same thing that I gave them. And so they played with it. They made it theirs. And so I added my 2 cents worth in, and then we took it to key leaders in the church that weren't on the board and got their input. And then once we had something that we thought we could present to the entire church, we took it to the entire church and said, hey, this is something we've been playing with. This is something that the different people on the board and the different folks have come up with. And so we have this vision statement for you. Now, what we want you to do is we want you to change the vision statement any way that you want. And what we found is there wasn't a lot of change that people wanted to make. And so why did I go to all that trouble? For unity. So now when we have this vision statement, everything that we do is about, making sure that we're going in the same direction. And they say, well, I don't like that. Well, what's my answer? Anybody? It's yours. This is something that I pulled out and just decided we wanted to do. This is you. You voted on this. You had input on this, especially board members. And so this does all. It helps you keep your priorities and responsibilities and accountability. And so maybe what's an example of a good vision statement? Vision statement example is building relationships with God and each other because we care. Then you use care as a synonym, as we heard about last night. Care as a synonym. Care. Was anybody here last night? Care. Anyway, contemporary worship, activating newcomers, reaching the unchurched, and encouraging each other. So this is a great example of a vision statement. This isn't mine. This is one I took from somebody else. And so when you put this vision statement together, you say, okay, we're going to build relationships with God and each other by contemporary worship, activating newcomers, reaching unchurched, and encouraging one another. Now you have a pretty well thought out statement there that one everybody can grab a hold of. Ours is to be and to make Christ-like disciples by being the light of faith, hope, and love to everybody that we come into contact with. So we use light as the light is to love unconditionally. invite other people to Christ, to grow in the knowledge of the Word, to honor and adore Christ, and to together depend on one another. And so that's easy for people to digest, people to talk about. And so you start moving in the same direction. You see, vision equals what you see with the eyes of your heart. A lot of times we think vision is about what we can make happen. The pastor I talked about that I worked with in Texas, he couldn't get himself to anything he couldn't figure out how to do. And so his vision was always limited because he had to figure it out. So he had traps that he ran into. And you don't have this, but there's some vision traps, and I'm just going to read through these really quickly. There's some vision traps of problem-solving syndrome, the busy enough syndrome, the self-support or survival syndrome, the stand-alone syndrome, the comfort syndrome, the no vacancy syndrome. These are traps. So for instance, if you want to solve every problem with your vision before you implement your vision, you're never going to get there. Because there's problems waiting for you that you've never thought of. And so you're never going to be able to figure it out. So don't try to figure out everything. The self-support or survival syndrome. Where's my place in the new church? One of the biggest things that we dealt with within the merge of our two churches, and for those of you who know that history, was our leaders were trying to figure out, where do I fit? Where do I fit? I was always the missionary leader, or I was always the Sunday school teacher. We lost somebody because she wasn't teaching Sunday school anymore. It wasn't because we didn't let her teach. It's just that when we gave people opportunity to sign up for classes, even her own people who came in with the merge didn't want to be in her class. Now, who got the blame for that?
You.
Absolutely, because by God, I kept everybody away. But the truth of the matter was, nobody wanted to be in her class anyway. They just didn't have a choice.
Whatever.
You know? Exactly. Really mine. So you have the comfort syndrome, the no vacancy syndrome. We're going to go through really quick. The fortress syndrome, the family staff syndrome. You've got to be really careful with the family staff syndrome. That isn't necessarily everybody that's related to the pastor. Maybe you have one family that's in complete control of your church. And that's easy when you're in a church under 100 or just over 100 to have. You have one family that thinks if I leave, the doors will close. And then when they don't, they're surprised. When I was in Colorado, I had a family. As soon as I got there to Colorado, they went on a European vacation for 6 weeks, which was nice, I guess. And he counted and was the head usher. And so when he left, he didn't leave anybody in charge of that. And I'm brand new. And so we had a brand new person in the church who was really excited about Jesus and serving. And so I said, you count and you be the head usher until this guy comes back. And so 6 weeks later, the guy comes back. You know, we don't know when he's coming back, so he just kind of shows up and is getting ready to take his spot. And this new person's counting and doing the head ushering. And as I'm preaching, the guy that came back, he's got lunch. And so I contacted him that day because it really bothered me. I was kind of, wanted to, what happened? He's like, well, you don't need me. He's like, whose idea was it to replace me? I'm like, well, so should we not have counted while you were in Europe? Kind of the deal. But the whole part of that is they were the family that was there when that church was 15. We started bringing new people back to the church. And they were taking leadership. They got mad again. They're like, they left us. They deserted us. And so we don't want them back. Because of that, you got to watch that when you are doing vision. Because if you get a hold of somebody and you put too much stock in one family or one person as you're developing your vision will not change from what it is. And so you'll have the same thing that you already have. So you'll never be able to move forward. Another thing that you don't have, what are some things that will stop our vision? Your past can stop your vision. Your pressures can stop your vision. Problems, personal and church problems can stop your vision. Programs can stop us. Can I just tell you, I think I said this earlier this week. I had a a toddler, was getting ready to go, well, he wasn't a toddler, getting ready to go into school when I was in Colorado. For my first 3 years in Colorado, we did not have a children's ministry. It wasn't because I didn't want one. I wanted one. I had a kid, and you know, I wanted that, but I didn't have anybody who was willing to take that on. And part of the reason I didn't have anybody to take that on is I had some dead ministries that people were leading that weren't accomplishing anything. And so in order for us to break 100, which we finally did, we had to let go of some of those old programs. So we could focus on programs that we need to that we're going to grow the church. Nothing wrong with those programs. That was the bad part. It wasn't like they were anything bad. It was just they weren't really helping us get anywhere. And so we're spending a terrible amount of resources and time to get things going that we really didn't have time to do. So your programs can stop you. Your prognosis can stop you. There's some people that think, oh, we'll never be a church of more than 50. That's not true. I'm at Fountain City, Indiana. It's kind of in no place, a farm area, just in between, I think, Newcastle and Richmond, Indiana, kind of out there, a little farm town. Fountain City's like what, 600 people?
Maybe.
They have a little Wesleyan church, and I remember it because it was across the street from my grandma's house. There's a little Wesleyan church, a little white, little Wesleyan church. They might have 20, 25 people the whole time. My grandma liked it. She could walk across to go to church. That same Wesleyan church in a town of about 500 or 600 runs about 1,500 people.
Wow.
Wow.
And then they're drawing farmers, drawing people from Richmond, Indiana, and different places. And somebody had to have a vision for that, right? Now the prognosis could have been that church is just going to be a little 50-person church, because it's always been that. But they finally got a pastor and took them past that. And that vision came from God, I believe. Statements about vision. I'm just going to let you read through that real quick, because I'm going to get to some more steps. So I only got like 3 minutes left. So, Christianity Today wrote 92% of church members cannot tell you the vision of their church. Yet vision determines the size of the congregate and the money there. Just a little bit. This is not a new statistic. Okay, I think I remember getting this almost 10 years ago. I bet it's not much different. I bet it's not much different. 92% of churches couldn't even tell you what their vision statement is. You come into our church, 50% of our people can tell you what our vision statement is. And some of you are saying, 50%, we should have more than that. Well, that's because I got 50% new people. And so they're learning what that is. And so if there's a weakness that we have, and I'm not just going to tell you the great things that we do, here's the bad thing. If you take a look at my stats, over this last year, we plateaued this year. And the reason that we plateaued is I didn't put the work that I'm getting ready to tell you to put into this last year because I was too busy and distracted with other things. That's my confession to you. But I guarantee you this next year, I'm going to have the work put in. And the work's going to come out and, I believe, grow, not only numerically, but spiritually for our people. Okay? And so...
Can you say that again, Scott?
What's that?
What you just said.
About
the reason.
Part of the reason we plateaued is because with all the merge and all the different things that I was dealing with, I was distracted from doing the things that I'm talking to you guys about doing today. So the vision, so what I'm going to get into in a minute, where that is every single one of your ministries needs to have a ministry plan that supports the vision of your church. Every single one of them. Your Sunday school, your visitation, your missions, your youth, every single one of them has to have a ministry plan that gets you there. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And so how do you prepare that? You prepare, first of all, by biblical priorities. That's given. I don't think I want to go too far there. Again, the vision can't be you. The vision has to come from God. I got 1 minute. There's no way I'm going to get to know all this man. So, Great Commission, Great Commandment is a great place to start. You got to look at your pastor's strengths. Sometimes you're going to have to be okay with not being in charge of everything. If there are things you're not good at, then find somebody that's good at it. In your congregation, let them take over. You got to be honest about your congregational gifts. Don't have a vision for a $4 million facility if your people can't raise $100,000. That's ridiculous to do, unless God's really in it. I haven't had any of the experiences been talked about this week. I've never had anybody give me a check for $100,000 or $50,000 or $60,000. And so you guys need to pray for my faith or something. I don't have that kind of thing. So until that happens, I got to be reasonable with what my congregation can do. And then you got to know your present opportunities. What is the one thing in your community that you would see as the biggest need that nobody is doing anything about?
Drug addiction.
What's that?
Drug addiction.
Drug addiction. What better place than the church to take care of it? Our Celebrate Recovery, just on that end, our Celebrate Recovery, because that was one of the things we did, they're a feeder in our ministries now. People are coming, they're getting saved, and they're getting sanctified, and they're going into ministry in our church. And so, now we got to be willing to let that happen, but that says a lot, about that kind of thing. So then you got to present the vision. How do you present it? You present it simply. When we presented our vision of being a light of faith, hope, and love, I present the vision at least once a year. Whether it's through one message that I do, or whether it's a series of messages that I do, and then throughout almost every single one of my messages, I talk about being a light of faith, hope, and love. Now, some of us think, man, that's overkill. Well, if that's our vision, that's our mission, then, and that's come from God, shouldn't that be easy to work through any of our messages? Mm-hmm. That should just be natural. That should just be a natural progression. And that way people know what you're about. But then you gotta pursue the vision by developing a ministry plan, which this is the most important thing. I'm going to skip that one as well. Establishing goals. First, after you have your vision and mission statement, you need to establish goals to support the vision. You need to establish goals to present the mission. So what you need to do then, so what's the definition of the goal? There's a specific target. The goal should be worthy, attainable, and measurable. You've heard this kind of thing before. This isn't new for a lot of us. But whatever your goal is, so if my goal is to let's say it's not there. So my goal is, let's say, to raise giving by 20%. So that's a goal. So the next thing I have to ask is, how do I make that happen? Well, maybe I make that happen by preaching stewardship messages. Now, maybe I make that happen by doing a Dave Ramsey type program to the church. And so you have this goal, but now you got to figure out strategies to make that happen. If all you have is the goal, it's just a great idea. And your people aren't going to come up with a strategy. You're going to have to help them come up with a strategy. After you do the goal, then what you want to do is you want to develop a strategy. A strategy is a detailed course of action that enables a church to accomplish its goals. A strategy should match the unique style of each congregation. A strategy should match the resources of each congregation. Kind of repeat a little bit on that. So there's the example that I kind of gave you. Increase finance by 20% is the goal. Strategy by preaching a series of stewardship messages, teaching weekend financial seminars, having testimonies of those who have been blessed by God. See how simple that really is? I mean, that's not rocket science. And if you came here, we're not here to give you your vision. We're not here to give you your goals. We're just here to get you to start thinking that direction. What is the vision that God's given for your church? What are the goals that you need to accomplish to make sure and point you to that vision? And so that's an important thing. Let's see. So how do you create a ministry plan? Ministry plan components, vision statement for the ministry area. This is where I was talking about every one of your ministry areas need to have a ministry plan that goes along with your ministry plan as a larger church. So vision statement for the ministry area, goals for the ministry area, strategies to reach the goals. There's no difference in their ministry plan than yours, except the wording is going to be a little bit different. One of the things that, and this is a tip, and you can take it or leave it, for me, what I did early on was we had the vision statement, and then I said, okay guys, now you need to give me a vision statement for your ministry area that meets, it's kind of the same as ours, and that was a training. And so I just kind of took that out of their hand after that, and I said, okay, here's our mission statement, here's your mission statement. Now, in your area, how will you accomplish the mission of the church? And so that works much better because they don't have to do the hard part of coming up with their own statement. Kind of deal. So when they come up with their own statement, it's going to be a little bit different than yours. And then it's going to, the rule of degrees. And that kind of thing. So that's important. Steps to creating a ministry plan. Selecting, and you don't have to do this, select an acrostic that expresses your vision for the ministry area. Write a one-sentence vision statement for your area. Use the letter of the acrostic to name a new goal for the ministry area. Goal will always begin with to or exist to do, whatever. Kind of an example of this, I think. I'm going to skip through this. This is an example of a ministry plan. So they have model, this is their acrostic. Ministry plan of goals and strategies for finance and administration. Model excellence to maximize ministry efforts and resources. So the goal is to manage finances and administration in a way that will enable each ministry area to have funds necessary to support the program. That's their goal. So their strategies, by establishing budgets that will keep the ministry as focused, by tracking income, by forecasting expenses, by maintaining integrity of financial matters, by developing a data system department to assist pastors. So again, just kind of an example. You have that in your deal there. There's another example. We'll go through there real quickly. Now, this is the most important part of everything that I've done. You can have the best mission statement in the world. You can have the best plan in the world. But if you don't execute it, it'll be a giant waste of time. This is where most of the people that I talk to poo-poo this fall. Because it's hard work. You do not get to sit and put your feet up in your office. And none of the folks here are doing that. But we all know people that are doing that. The best advice I give to people that aren't willing to do the hard work of ministry is get out of ministry. You're not doing your congregation any good. You're not doing God any good. You are making yourself miserable. Because you're never getting anywhere. And guess what? It's never your fault. We get on our people,